So when you gain perspective, you think of people differently. When you gain perspective, you are able to make judgment, clear and right judgment. When you gain perspective, you don't just jump into conclusion. You assess the situation and you are able to respond correctly. Perspective. When we don't have correct and accurate perspective, we are afraid. When we don't have correct and accurate perspective, we want to make decisions, but most of our decision at that point is based on feeling, how you feel. At that point, when you don't fully have perspective, you are reacting rather than responding. In a world of colors, we start with the black and white until we realize there are primary colors, and the combination of those primary colors yield some tertiary colors and other color themes. In a world of dimension, we can only think of length and breadth until we realize there are other dimensions. There are dimensions in the 3D and there are dimensions in the 4D. Even there are higher dimensions where you are able to see the up and the down, the right and the left, the front and the back. You know, pictures in higher dimensions are clearer. As human, when we are able to gain perspective, we see things from different angles, which give us a balanced insight into that subject or into that situation. You want to think of yourself as a human in a game, in a dynamic game of life. And the reason why I call it dynamic is because it is measured in the sequence of time. Yesterday, today, and then in the future. So part of your information set is built on what you have gone through in the past, your experience, your history, things that has happened to you in the past. Those experiences with people, with situations, with process forms a key part of your information set. And those information sets provide the insights that your brain draws from whenever you need to make a decision. So you want to think of human as in a dynamic game, and you have this information set. But a dynamic game is an infinite game, and you have other players in the game. You only know your information set. You don't know what is in other people's information sets. So when your brain is thinking, your cerebral cortex, when it's thinking about how to make choices or decisions around a particular subject or situation, your brain draws from your information set and provides and suggests some choices for you to make. But your brain might also be able to tell you how people have reacted to your choices in the past. So because of that, imagine yourself that even though you are a player in that game, you have multiple players in that game too. You don't fully understand their information set, but you have an understanding of your own information set. I want you to know that as much as you want to think of yourself as a human who cares about their own journey, about their own situation, about their own life, their success, their own goal, other people's choices, other people's decision, other people's choices impact your own decision. And how it impacts your own decision can change your outcome. So when it comes to perspective, when it comes to gaining perspective in life, because we don't fully have all the information sets, as human, we are limited. We only see what is right here in our face. We are limited. There are limitations to what we can see. Because we live within time, we are only here for an amount of time. We can only see what is either happening right now or what has happened in the past. But we don't have the full set of information about everything, including the future. Only God is omnipotent, is powerful, He understands all the information set of everyone that is involved in that game. And pardon me for using the word game, because by the time I'm done with this subject today, you will understand why the word game fits into the description of this information set. So because God is the omnipotent and has power and full knowledge of everyone information set, we have to rely on that all-knowing God to be able to gain perspective. We are limited in knowledge. We are limited in sight. We can only see what our eyes can see. We can only see what our eyes can see, or what is being revealed to us. And what is being revealed to us, it's even in parts. The Bible made us understand that we know in parts, we understand in parts. And because of that, gaining perspective relies on others. It relies on asking questions, answering questions, learning, reading, going on adventure, experiencing life, experiencing situation that continue to enhance your perspective. When you gain perspective, you have clarity. You are responding to situations in life and you are not reacting, because you are considering and you're thinking through the implication and the consequences of every of your choices in your decision making. And in the process of your decision making, you are not just thinking in terms of your own information set, what is operating based on your own story, on your own history. You are not just thinking in terms of your own information set, you are also considering other information sets and how they are going to respond or react to your choices. You want to think of this topic today as part of decision making and choices and building habits, because our habits are formed based on what we repeat over time. Repeated actions over time are what we call habits. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how to gain perspective. I've been talking a lot about this information set, and I want you to think about how you assess a person. You know, when you look at a person, you can assess their worth and essence based on what they did or what they are trying to do. You recall the story of the woman that was caught in adultery. You know, the story of that woman caught my attention, the story in Mark 5:25 to 34. So the law keepers, they came to Jesus, they brought that woman, and they claimed that she was caught in the very act. They saw her in the very act. That was their perspective. They only saw her fault and the error that she had committed. There's a difference between a mistake and an error and a bad decision. An error is something that you didn't prepare for, but you find yourself in it because of the choices that you make. A mistake is something that happened, is a bad choice that happened, not because you intentionally want it to happen. You've done all your checks, you've reviewed the document, yet after sending it and hitting send, you now realize that you have sent it to the wrong person. That's a mistake. You did your own due diligence, but sometimes mistakes happen. Remember, we are human. We are not perfect. We don't know everything. Sometimes you want to type the email, you forget an alphabet. That's a mistake. But when you think about bad decision is when you have all the information in front of you, when you have all the insight, and yet you chose a decision that will lead to the wrong outcome. That exactly is what we call a bad decision. So this woman obviously, the woman caught in adultery obviously had made a bad choice. And there are consequences. You know, the lawmaker, they saw the bad choice through the lens of judgment. They wanted to throw a stone at this woman. They've already given up on her. They thought it was supposed to be the end of this woman who was caught in the very act of adultery. Based on the Mosaic law, she should be thrown stones and be killed. Jesus, God, having the full information of this woman's past and present and the future through the lens of love and grace and forgiveness, through the lens of empathy and compassion and reconciliation. Jesus, who knows everything about this woman and what could have pushed her into that adultery, Jesus showed her compassion. Jesus knew her background. Only God knows the full information about that woman, about the story. So when you gain perspective, you think of people differently. When you gain perspective, you are able to make judgment, clear and right judgment. When you gain perspective, you don't just jump into conclusion. You assess the situation and you are able to respond correctly. For the law keepers, the Sadducee and the Pharisee, as termed and captioned in the Bible, they only saw the woman in the now, in the moment. They believed in their heart that it was over. But Jesus knew there is potential. Jesus knew there is an opportunity for grace here. And Jesus showed this woman compassion. Jesus showed this woman empathy. Jesus showed this woman love. When it comes to perspective, people who lack perspective, it leads to poor judgment. You look at people and you look at the way they dress and you quickly assume that this person can't be anybody. This is a nobody. I don't have to respect them. I hope you are not doing that. You know, sometimes people look at other people and they quickly conclude in their heart based on the way the person dresses, and they just conclude their net worth. Our God is a God that gives everyone an opportunity to show who they truly are. And Jesus looked down and said, whoever has not committed any sin should be the first to throw a stone at this woman. That is perspective. When you have full perspective, you don't give up on people easily. When you have full perspective on things, you make correct choices. Before I start going into why perspective is important and why you should build perspective and gain perspective in your decision making, I want you to think of what is perspective. You know, when people ask you, I remember there was a story of this man that Jesus healed, and he had an eye issue. Jesus touched his eyes, and then Jesus said, what do you see? He said, oh, I see men walking like trees. And Jesus said, no, you need to come back. I need to touch you again. Because if you see men walking like trees, you're going to assume that they are plants. You're going to assume that they are non-living things, and you're going to start cutting them, thinking they are plants. Because how you see people is how you treat people. When you see people who disrespect others, it's because of their lack of perspective. When you see people who use other people, it's because of their limited perspective, their inaccurate perspective. You know, perspective is having the full picture, information or knowledge about the situation or about a process or about people, about a purpose. What is perspective? Perspective is having the full picture, the full information and knowledge about the situation or a process or a person that allows you to make informed decisions that will help you reach your desired goals or outcome. So when you have full information about something, it helps you to make an informed decision. Perspective is an architectural term. You know, when architects, when they look at a structure or an object, they kind of draw the objects and they draw it on paper, and they kind of provide the length and the height and the width and the depth and position of this object in relation to other objects. That is perspective. So perspective is not just about one single object. You want to think in terms of how it relates to other objects. So perspective to an architect is the art of drawing a solid object on a two-dimensional surface so as to give the right impression of their height, of their width, of their depth and in relation to each other when viewed from a particular point of view. So when you think of this definition, the question that will come to your mind is that how do we know the point of view that we're looking at? Because everyone can look at an image and we can both have a different conclusion. You want to think of like people go to art showcase and they look at the art, and some person will look at the image and they will think it's a woman crying, and sometimes the person will look at the image and they will say, oh, is a man that is strong and is trying to conquer some land. And the impression that you get from looking at an image depends on your own information set. So your perspective depends on your own information set and how you process things in your own cerebral cortex. So you want to think of it that we cannot all see things in the same way. Two people can look at the same object and they can have different conclusion. They can take out different conclusion. So perspective is an attitude towards something or a point of view. Your perspective is the way you think of something, or you think of a situation, or the way you think of a process. Your perspective is how you believe that process look like in relation to others. Your perspective is your point of view. But our point of view not only depends on your angle towards that object, it also depends on your altitude, wherever you're standing. Like if you're at a lower altitude, your perspective is limited. You can only see the level that your height can carry you. But when you are at a higher altitude, you gain more perspective. You are able to see more. So when you start thinking of perspective in this way, you will realize that the place of gathering perspective depends a lot on gathering knowledge, understanding a topic, understanding the situation, not just from one side, but looking at the different relations, different components, different other variables that are relevant to that subject. You know, in economics research, when we formulate our regression framework, we think of relevant variable based on economic theory that we believe can explain that dependent variable. So those relevant variable, we throw them on the right hand side, and we believe that those right hand side variable can explain the left hand side variable. But there are other things, other unexplainable factors that are parts of that model which we can't explain, and because of that we put it in our error term. We believe that the unexplained part is going to be in our residual. We will characterize it as a residual. But when we look at our residual and we begin to see some patterns in our residual, we are now able to see that this residual kind of has an explanatory power on the dependent variable. There are some omitted variables that are missing in this model framework. So you want to think of our limitation as human beings. We can only see what our eyes can see. We can only see what we can see now. We don't have all the full story. We don't have all the full picture. We don't have all the relevant information to be able to make an informed decision at that point. We don't know everything. We are not God. We are not all-knowing. So we don't know everything. So there are some pieces of this model in decision making, in gaining perspective, that because of our limitation, because we don't know, sometimes we make decisions that are not only prone to error, but that lead us on a chain path that is not part of our desirable outcome. Perspective matter. Perspective matter. And whatever you cannot perceive, you cannot receive. Because until your mind can perceive something and you can understand it fully, your mind is not able to attract that thing or receive it. You want to think of it this way. When you are thinking about perspective, if I can't see myself as a wealthy individual, Even when opportunity comes for me to become wealthy, I won't even be able to recognize those opportunities, to be able to take advantage of them, because my perspective is limited. When human perspective is limited about people, we box them, and we think of people as remaining in their current status. That is why we give up on people, and we think whatever they are going through now, or whatever situation they are in now, is going to remain permanent like that. Our problems are not permanent. I just want to encourage somebody that is going through challenges now, and you are thinking to yourself, when will it end? When will it be over? Our problems has an expiration date. Our challenges have expiration date. Nothing is permanent in this world, even our challenges. You know, when we read through the Bible, there is always this word I like. When we get to a point and the Bible is describing what the Israelites are going through, and then the Bible will say, and it came to pass. God spoke to Moses, and it came to pass. God spoke to Joshua, and it came to pass. An angel appeared to Mary. When you focus on the now, it makes you feel like the situation is hopeless. It makes you feel like nothing good can come out of this situation. It is hopeless. Nothing good can come out of it, because our perspective is limited. You know, as I was talking through that story, because of limited perspective, sometimes we are afraid. We believe that whatever we are going through now is our end. No. Help is coming. Tough time never lasts, but tough people do. Even when we go through the valley of the shadow of death, we should remain focused in our perspective. We should not fear any evil, for God is with us. You know, the story that comes to my mind was the story of Elijah and one of his servants. At some point, they were going to capture this prophet of God. And he was on a mountain. He was there seeking the face of God. And the servant came to him and said, they've surrounded the mountain. They are going to capture us. And the man laughed. The man of God laughed, because he has a better and more accurate perspective. He that is in us is greater than he that is in the world. What the man of God could see, the servants couldn't see it. And when the man of God asked God to open the eyes of the servant saw, and he realized that they had an angel of God surround that mountain. The army that surrounded that mountain were stronger than the army of the king that wanted them captured. Perspective. When we don't have correct and accurate perspective, we are afraid. When we don't have correct and accurate perspective, we want to make decision. But most of our decision at that point is based on feeling, how you feel. At that point, when you don't fully have perspective, you are reacting rather than responding. You are reacting. You are acting based on the facts, based on what you can see, based on what you can feel. Faith ride on facts. Faith ride on facts. You know, perspective is your attitude towards something. Is what you believe about that situation. When you have a clear perspective on something, you will realize that nothing is permanent, even our troubles. When you gain perspective on a situation, it builds faith in you. It builds courage in you. You have more information that allows you to respond meaningfully, that allows you to make an informed decision. You know, I recall growing up as a kid, I was a slow learner. I struggled a lot. And my mom was worried about my academics and my pursuit, my academic pursuit. My mom, she was worried. I mean, she was praying about it, and sometimes she would make me work on my homework several times. After I am done with the after school lesson, she will pull me to her side and she will teach me, because her perspective on that situation now made her invest in me, so that whatever she's afraid of doesn't become my reality. There are times that Our limited perspective should drive us to action. But we should not focus on that limited perspective and allow fear to drown us from taking action. That fear didn't drive my mom into taking, it didn't stop my mom from taking action. She invested in me, she enrolled me in extra coaching. That girl that they were going to move back 2 grades lower in elementary ended up finishing cum laude in her college and with a PhD in economics. You know, when we look at people and we look at their current situation, we tend to give up. Lack of perspective make you give up on people. We think it's over for them. Thank God. I mean, it's my mom. I don't think my mom will give up on me. Even the Bible agreed that a mother will not give up on her daughter. She didn't give up on me. She saw beyond what she can see at the present. When we don't have full information and we don't have perspective on people, on situation, we give up easily. We are impatient. We react. We act based on emotion. We rush into decision. And then we end up with regrets. Lack of perspective make you look foolish, and you have to apologize to people for no reason, because now you have said a word because you thought what you knew was the complete information. Now you have to chew back your work and apologize. One thing that you will know from this video today is that when you gain perspective, it helps you make informed decision. When you gain perspective, it sharpens your clarity. You see clearly. You see people clearly. You see situation clearly. You see a process clearly. You understand it fully well. And when clarity comes, it builds confidence. When you are very clear about what you need to do, about the people around you, you know how to leverage them and use them even to help you reach your goal by helping them reach their goal, because you gain perspective. Remember what I said, you have an information set, but your information set should not only draw from your own information set, it should draw from the information set of others, because we are in a dynamic game. In fact, it is an infinite dynamic game that you are playing here. So gaining perspective means you are building your information set. Before I jump on how you can build your information set, let me talk about another example of a woman. That will be Agai. You know, this maid servant of Sarah and Abraham, at some point she agreed to carry a baby for her master. I mean, that's a good cause. But as soon as she got pregnant, you know, that changed her attitude, and the mutual feeling in the relationship changes. She started acting up. She started acting with pride. And Sarah said, we can't have 2 madams in this house. So Sarah sent her out. And on her way to nowhere, she was confused. She was tired. She was hopeless. She cried to God. Agai, at that point, only know about what God was doing in her. She only knows the information about what she's going through currently and what has happened to her in the past. But she doesn't have the full information of what God was doing in the life of Abraham and Sarah. How God has promised them a son. She didn't know that full information. And how that son was going to be a child of promise. A child that will be God's own people. That will be the fathers of God's own people, the Israelites. So the angel appeared to her and said, you have to return back and submit to your master. You have to return back and submit to your master. When we don't have full perspective, we act impulsively. We just react to situation based on how we feel about that situation. She left that house not knowing that even the baby she was carrying, there was God's blessing on that baby. Ishmael. The angel told her to go back and submit. Perspective requires patience. To be able to gain perspective, you want to be patient with the process. Sometimes we want to see the action, especially some of us that like to execute and get things done But when you get things done and you are stepped on toes, What is the joy in getting it done and there is no one to celebrate the joy with? There's nobody to celebrate the success with, because you have stepped on toes while climbing the stair, because you have stepped on toes while executing the dream. When it comes to perspective, perspective builds your patience. In the process of gaining perspective, you want to gain knowledge. Perspective brings direction. It brings direction. When you are patient enough to understand God's own angle, God's own view, point of view. Remember when I started talking about architectural, their objects, and how they look at the object in relation to other. You have an information set. God sees the information set of all the other players that are key to that dynamic game that you're playing. And I'm sorry for calling it dynamic game. I mean, that helps you kind of understand how your actions can lead to some consequence and some outcome based on the reactions of others to your action. So when you are looking at all of this together, you will realize that when it comes to perspective, perspective is a journey of patience. I'm not saying you wait there and don't take action on your dreams or on your goal. No, that is not the point I'm making here. I'm saying when you patiently wait to have an understanding on both sides, the depth, the width, the length, the breadth of this topic, of the situation, you are able to make an informed decision. When you have a full understanding of not only your information set, but you wait patiently on God to give you a revelation of the information set of other stakeholders in that decision, you are able to make a well-informed decision. And people will look at you and say, how did you do it? Just like the perspective set clears goal. When you have perspective, you have clarity. You know, when you have clarity, you are able to see a lot of the full picture. You might not see the complete picture, but you're going to see a lot of the picture that will allow you to set a clear goal. You know, in Habakkuk, the prophet, in that book of Habakkuk, the prophet said, I will stand upon my watch and I will ask to see what God will speak, what God will say to me, in that Habakkuk 2:2. You know, he said, I will stand upon my watch. The prophet said, write the vision down, make it plain so that those who read it can run with it. Now, at some point in this, our discussion on a different mindset, I'm going to touch on vision. But I want you to understand that when you have a correct perspective, it helps you set a clear vision. You're playing in a dynamic game. A perspective you do not know is an hidden information set. So when you stand upon your watch, when you seek to see what God wants you to do, it helps you to set a goal that aligns your outcome or your desire to God's will. So in your own brain and in your own thinking, you want to make sure you are making choices based on the right information, the perspective of God on that matter. Everyone can have opinion different on their point of view. But God's point of view, God's perspective is the truth on any subject, on any situation, about any person, and about any form of process. God's perspective is the truth. But if you pay attention to that Habakkuk 2, if you pay attention very well to that Habakkuk 2, you will realize that the man of God said, I will stand. It wasn't just sitting. Perspective is a standing process. You have to stand up in your confidence, in your prayer, in your inquisitive curiosity to be able to learn and ask questions. Perspective is a standing process. You don't gain perspective by sitting down and watching things go by. If you want to gain clarity, you want to be able to stand up and ask questions so that you can have perspective that will help you set clear goals. Because perspective builds your clarity, it also builds your confidence. You know, when you have a true image on the outcome of a situation, it gives you understanding, right? And when you have some understanding, you gain insight. Insight, knowledge, and understanding about a situation bring clarity. And that clarity brings confidence that enables you to be able to face the situation. So sometimes we don't know because we don't know. And because we have limited knowledge, we are not able to take advantage of even the opportunity that's standing right in our face. Because we don't know, we are not able to take the advantage of the people, the help that God has sent our way. Because we don't know, we treat people anyhow and we don't benefit from the grace upon their life. Perspective will help you value people so that you can draw from the grace that God has placed on their life for you. Before I conclude in this video, I just want to share one more thing about perspective. You know, I've been talking a lot about God's point of view is the true point of view. It's the true point of view on any subject. God knows everything because God created everyone. He knows everyone. And because God knows everyone, God knows how we stand and how you stand in your interaction with others. God knows how your choices and your decision impacts others, and God knows how other people's decisions impact others. When you walk with God in this journey of knowing perspective, you will begin to respond with wisdom and not emotion. You will begin to consider the facts and you are not acting preemptively. You are not acting preemptively. You are not acting based on your emotion or based on your stimulant. You are not acting because somebody triggers you. You are moving with grace and clarity based on the instruction that is coming from your Creator. You know, when I've been talking a lot about perspective. I've defined perspective, why you need perspective, what is perspective, and how perspective could help you achieve your goal. So let's now talk about how you can build your perspective. I've touched on the place of knowledge. Perspective is built based on knowledge. The Bible said wisdom is the principal thing. In all thy getting, get understanding, get knowledge, get wisdom, read, ask questions. Ask people who are ahead of you. Ask people who are below you. I mean, for me, when it comes to gaining perspective, especially when I'm in the middle of making decisions that I know I don't have a full understanding or a full information from, I would always pray that God will send people my way who may be able to provide answer. Because sometimes when we pray to God to send help, or when we pray to God to help us, God send instruction and God send people, and people come and bring intelligence into our life. So when I pray for knowledge, and that knowledge, I pay attention to what people are saying around me, what they are dropping around me. I don't just ignore even the voice of children. So I serve in the family ministry at a church. Even the voices of children around me sometimes is a pointer to what God wants me to do. Sometimes I will be praying about something and seeking knowledge and God's perspective on that thing. And in the middle of grocery, doing my shopping, a child might be the one that will speak the voice, the word that I need. So knowledge comes from different places. Solomon said, go to the ants. They don't walk in the winter. They bury their head in the winter and they come out in summer. You see them very annoying all over our houses in the summer. But that is wisdom. They walk when they need to walk and rest when the weather is severe. Knowledge can come from different places. Sometimes you have to be willing to pay a coach to train you on what to do. Sometimes you have to be willing to pay for that conference so that you can gain perspective from people who are already doing what you intend to do. Sometimes you have to seek audience with people who are already going to benefit from the idea that you are thinking of producing. We are in a world of individual, but we also live in a community. So when it comes to gaining perspective, you want to build on knowledge. The next thing I'm going to talk about is that, when architects, when they draw all these angles, they see how those objects fit together, right? When your perspective, what it does is that it helps you understand the relations and connections in life. Sometimes when you focus on yourself, one thing that happens is that you think at the minimal level. An accurate perspective will give you not only an action, but also help you understand the reaction that will follow your actions. Sometimes you think of only you. For example, in a relationship, let me use this story. Sometimes people will say, oh, I'm going to cut off some people, cut off this family or cut off this loved one, and then we can pick it up later, or we can pick up the relationship when I'm ready. You hear people say that. I would say you hear people say that a lot. I do not mind cutting the rope. I do not mind cutting the connection from family. Don't worry, I can tie it together. I can tie it back. When things are right, I can come back and tie it. And things will just be as it used to be. But I want you to think of this. Imagine a pole on two sides and a rope is tied to both sides of the pole. And you cut it. Try and tie it together. You will see that the rope is shorter. And because the rope is shorter, even if you are able to get the rope to tie, there's going to be a knot. It is not going to be the way it used to be. When we don't have correct perspective, things like this happen. People give perspective. We should not just live in our own cocoon and think we know everything. The power of relationship is a perspective builder. Go to places, visit places. Perspective wears the lens of love, of faith in yourself and faith in others. Perspective wears the lens of hope. It's hope for better things to come. Perspective listen. Perspective listen. Perspective listen to others. And perspective, correct and true perspective, comes from the God Almighty. We don't have all the full picture, but God knows everything. He is the Almighty. He created every player in this dynamic game of life. He knows what is in their information set because He is the leader. He is the master of the infinite game of life. When we reach out to God, we gain better perspective and we see clearly. If this video has been helpful, add a comment and let me know what you think of the video in the chat.